Good evening or good afternoon, Danvers. We're televising today from the DCAT studio in remote control. My name is Mark Zuberek, and I have my co-host Matthew Duggan, and we have a special guest today, the lead pastor Elisha Cho from the Danvers Church of the Nazarene, 188 Dayton Street in Danvers. What I like to do is this is the June 11th, 2020 segment of our show. And as I always say, and I don't know if anybody believes me, but transparency and independent reporting is our motto. The topics of the town news reporting is by Danvers producers for Danvers residents, and we always report the truth based on events in our town. And we primarily focus on Danvers events. But sometimes, as you know, we do have our own opinion and we include it. So I hope nobody minds. Now, if we, just before we introduce the pastor, I'd like to go back to our two wolves, the black and the white wolf, and explain that a little bit because I think last time we had a little bit of contradiction to what I said. This is a representation by a Indian chief. A Native American chief was teaching his grandson about life. He said, there are two wolves fighting in each and every one of us. One is pride, greed, anger, jealousy, hate, and resentment, while the other is love, humbleness, faith, hope, happiness, and courage. The grandson asked the grandfather, which wolf will win? And the grandfather wisely replied, the one you feed. So what we're doing here, which wolf will you feed? Think about it and start making a difference. And this is part of the show direction that we're trying to take, and we're trying to make a difference in the town of Danvers. So now what I'd like to do is introduce Elisha Cho, the pastor, and he will give us a little bit of the Christian perspective on the current conditions with our spiritual and personal relations with our community, families, and our government. This is called religious freedom. So Pastor Cho, please proceed.
Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity and privilege to be here today. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Matthew, and thank you, DCAT, for hosting. I'm just very, very blessed to be able to share some Christian worldview, Christian thoughts on what's going on. As a way of introduction, I hail from the country of South Korea. And when I was 7 years old, my family moved to the UK, and we lived there for about 7 years. And then we came back to South Korea. I finished off my studies and military duties. And then the Lord sent me to the Philippines as a missionary. And in 2011, my wife and I came over to Massachusetts as students at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. So I've been living in the States for about 9 years now. And I've been living in Danvers since 2014, and I love our town. And thank you so much for all the hard work both of you, all of you do for our town. What a situation we're going through right now through the pandemic, and with all the protests that are going on all around us. And for me, as a pastor, as a Christ follower, I've been praying fervently for God's wisdom and discernment in how we ought to perceive these situations. And it's not easy. It's not easy. Even today, I heard one of my parishioners reach out saying, my kids can't stay home any longer. We need to get out and meet somebody. We are born to socialize. We are social people. And so my heart aches to see how God sees this situation. And that's how I would define God's wisdom. Wisdom as defined through the scriptures would be how God sees the situation, not my point of view, not your point of view, not what the CDC says, not what the WHO says, but how does God see this situation? And for us as Christians, that's very, very important to us, because we are a people of the book, and the scriptures and the Holy Spirit, they lead us into understanding what we're going through. So what are we going through? Well, we have the pandemic to the protests, we have the quarantine to the curfews. So what's next even? We are living in unprecedented times, and obviously everyone is trying to find answers. We have information galore. A couple of months ago, people were saying we need to flatten the curve, stay home and save lives. And if you didn't have that banner up in your social media screen, then you were kind of out of it. And then maybe a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week back, if you didn't have a black screen on your social media page, then you were also out of it. So how do we make sense of this as a Christian, from a Christian perspective? Well, first thing we need to remember is that God is not surprised by this. We believe in a God who is all-powerful, all-knowing, and ever-present. So he knew exactly what we would be going through as a nation and as Christians, as people of God. And so we can trust in the fact that God knows all of what's going on now, and he sees from eternity to eternity. And that is very reassuring for us. But at the same time, the scripture teaches us that we are to be in the world, but not of it. In the world, but not of the world. And so it's an interesting perspective where we are living in this town of Danvers, and we are living in this day and age, but we have a perspective that is heavenly and eternal, and that gives us a lot of hope. So for me, as I've been experiencing the pandemic, experiencing just hearing news about what's been going on in this nation through the protests against racial injustice and whatnot, I've been praying a lot, and that would be my encouragement to our congregation, and also for you, if you are seeking for clarity and wisdom in this day and age, I would urge you to say, God, help. That's a simple prayer. Anyone can do that. God, help. And as I've been praying, the Lord has been giving me a lot of clarity. And at one point, one of our parishioners who used to be very active on social media said, you know what, Pastor Elisha, I've decided to take a fast from social media because it's just getting too much. I'm getting bombarded with so much information and I don't know what to think. And I said, dear sister, well done. Maybe sometimes we just need to unplug and we need to just look up at the sky and say, God, just thank you that you're in charge. God, I thank you, you know all things, and that you're involved and that you are actively working out the good for those who love you and have been called by your purpose. So those small things have been helping me even. I've detached myself from the news a little bit. I've detached myself from social media a little bit so that I can gain focus and ground myself in what's really true and seeking wisdom from God. At the same time, we've been, as a church, we've been trying to think of ways, how can we support our community? And so when the pandemic broke, for some odd reason, Mark and Matthew, TP was this issue, toilet paper. People had ran out of toilet paper. So our church family, we said, let's just get some toilet paper, two rolls from this family and one roll from this family. We brought our toilet paper together. We wrapped it in cellophane. We put one of our name cards in there and we began to distribute it to our neighbors, just knocking on their doors and saying, just in case you need toilet paper, we have some, would love to hand it to you. And our neighbors, many of them were very appreciative of our toilet paper ministry. Who would have thunk that toilet paper would have been this highly needed commodity? But yet we tried to fill that need. And when the pandemic continued and people were asked to wear masks, our church got together, and some of our people began to think about how can we make masks and distribute them, and we're able to make masks and distribute 100 plus to a local children's service organization. So we've been trying to be active in trying to ease the stress of what's going on all around us. So all in all, as Christians, we base our faith on the scriptures. And let me read for you just a portion from Ephesians 6:12. We read from Paul's letter to the Ephesus church, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places." That means we as Christians, we don't fight against people. Just because you and I disagree, that doesn't mean we cancel you out. We don't shame you. We don't say, "Oh, you're my enemy." On the contrary, Jesus teaches us that we should be praying for our enemies and love those who persecute us. And so with that heart of love, what we are trying to think and do in our spiritual walk is to recognize that our fight is not against humanity. It doesn't matter the color of your skin or where you live, your zip code, on the, or what kind of background you have. We are in a spiritual battle, and that battle is won on our knees through prayer, through devotion, through love, and also, most importantly, through reflection. Do I have any racial injustice in me? Do I have any fear that prohibits me from living a free life that God has intended me to live? And so being reflective instead of reactive has helped us as a people of God to become more active in our journey of faith, so that we could be a people that bring about change. I love what Mark introduced us to at the beginning of the segment about the two wolves. I use that very often in my sermons, by the way, Mark. It's, which wolf are you going to feed? Are you going to feed the wolf that wants the fear? Or are you going to feed the wolf that's going to be fed with goodness and joy and peace and liberty and freedom in Christ Jesus? And so for us as a people of God, we are becoming more reflective rather than reactive. But as we become reflective, we want to respond in a way that is kind and loving, sharing toilet paper if need be, sharing masks if need be, sharing joy through the scriptures as need be. And so that is our duty. We will pray, we will be reflective, and we will do as God leads us in this day and age where people are searching for answers, and we believe Jesus Christ is the answer to the questions that we are posing in this day and age. So I would encourage you to think about these things, that our war is not against people. We may disagree, but they are created in the image of God too. And so with love, with understanding, with dialogue, we're able to move forward together.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, that is the sentiment of our, understanding of what's going on. But we were basically more concerned with the spiritual, or I was, with the spiritual and religious freedoms that we have embarked on. We have a history of religious freedom. And the thing that got to me originally, and some of my old stories, but religious freedom is independent from the government. The government has to be reflective or reactive to the religious freedoms that we possess, whether there's government or no government. So I appreciate your comments, and the reason I approached you in regard to this segment of our show is I heard your sermon from last Sunday, and it sort of reflected or gave me an insight of your understanding of what's going on And, whatever Caesar's you give to Caesar, but then the rest you have to give to God. So I appreciate your time and thank you for your comments. And hopefully you will agree to come back on our show later on in the season.
Absolutely. I thank you so much. And let me just add one more thing. If it wasn't for the religious freedom of this nation, I would not be here in the United States of America. The American missionaries that came to my country, they risked their lives to share Jesus with us. The American soldiers and service members that fought for our freedom enabled me to live in a free country, to practice my religion, and to be able to come here and share this with you. And so I'm grateful for what God is doing through this nation, and God is not done with the USA yet, and we will continue to fight the good fight. So thank you very much for this opportunity that you've given me today.
Thank you very much for coming. And Matthew, do you have any comments or questions?
Just one question. That I believe you had a service recently that you performed out of doors, because I don't think churches are allowed to have services inside yet. That's maybe phase 3. So can you just briefly describe to our audience or to our viewers what that was like in terms of your own thoughts and also the congregants?
Sure. Thank you so much. Phase 1, the governor allowed churches, places of worship, to open at 40% capacity. For us, as a church family, our building is a bit limited. So our staff and I, we thought through some creative ideas and said, if we are outdoors, then it gives us more room for our church family to be welcomed home. And so we've been having outdoor services since 3 Sundays ago, and we've seen over 60 people of our own congregation and some people from our neighborhood join us in the comfort of their cars through FM radio, or if they feel comfortable to do social distancing worship, they can do that. And so it's been a wonderful experience to be outside, very different, but we believe this is a creative way to combat what we're going through as a church family.
Thank you very much. Matthew, you all set?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm all set. Thank you very much for your thoughts.
Thank you for coming, and we'll get back together again.
Absolutely. God bless you all. Take care.
Thanks. So we'll
Stay safe.
sign off the pastor. And what we need to do is follow into the next segment of our presentation. And I'm going to leave it to Matthew, to comment on it, because the clip that I filmed at Danvers Square for the presentation today is very short, but it's very close in identifying how the people really felt in the square. There were over 300 people there. So Matthew, take it on, and David, can you put the clip on, please? Here we go.
So I forget exactly what day it was. I think it was last Thursday.
Hey, let's see the sign over here. Come on this side.
But irregardless, there were people in my neighborhood in the Back Bay were apprehensive about this event, and based on what they've seen on TV, they weren't sure whether they should, bring the kids and the pets inside and lock the doors. But I went down there. I was down there for about 45 minutes down to the square, and it was a very pleasant experience. Mostly young people, I think college-aged kids. So they had quite a bit of enthusiasm, and there definitely was some cohesiveness there. There were older people as well, but it was just, very peaceful, well-behaved. I think everybody was basically had the same message, that we're all in this together, whether it be the pandemic or the economic turmoil or just, life in general, that, there's strength in unity. And that's what I felt when I was walking around. So,
See, the filming that I did was basically a panoramic view from both sides of the square. And I have very good experience. We had the police available to us in a remote, concealed, not concealed, but visible area. They really conducted themselves very well. I don't know how many officers were out there, but the two that we encountered and on bicycles were very pleasant, very attentive to our questions. Because as you know, I always have questions, but the square was well organized. Over 300, I believe, at least 300 high school, college, young adults. That's what it was all about. And David, are you on there? Okay, he must be on the phone because we've been able
Yep.
to do that.
So you can see it was a very orderly event. There was no blocking of traffic or causing any kind of, destruction, throwing items or anything like that. The people that were driving by were honking their horns, and oftentimes the crowd would join in unison with a chant. Yeah, it was good to see that the community came together this way. I assume most of the people were from Danvers, but I assume they're probably from other areas in the North Shore as well. But you can see everyone was very well behaved. So good to see that people can get together like this and convey a message.
Well, this is our First Amendment right, and we have an obligation to express it, and they did. I'd just like to give you a little bit of a perspective. The outpouring of support at the Danvers Square demonstration for the racial equality and the recent events in our country. Over 300 young people came out and demonstrated. Our police was strategically dispatched to support our residents from town and outsiders. The demonstration was peaceful and orderly. We all have a voice and the right to gather and exercise our First Amendment rights. And this is our freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, and the First Amendment rights. So thank you, Matthew. I think this was well done. And we have one more picture at the end with a message on it. So if David, if you can show that one, that'll be great. If you don't, that's fine too. We can move on to the next subject. Here's a person with a sign that really gets to the point. And it really comes down to listen, research, donate, and racism is still taking lives. So we just wanted to get that message across. I thought that was very appropriate. Thank you, David. The next item on our agenda here on our outline, and we are pretty good on time. We experienced or listened to a conference call that the selectmen had with the town manager. And this is all in regard to freedom of conducting business, major shifts in reopening the governor's illegal orders to shut down our businesses in the square. The town manager presented a outline of how it should take place. So Matthew, take it away.
Sure. So this meeting that you referred to, the selectmen's meeting, was this just 2 days ago, this past Tuesday, the 9th. So the selectmen have empowered the town manager to roll out some some temporary regulations to get our small businesses back open, and specifically the restaurants, to allow them to set up seating outside for outdoor dining, because indoor dining is still not allowed here in Massachusetts, I believe. So
Right.
these regulations, the town manager has been given the authority to streamline the bureaucratic process for businesses that already have the licenses and the permits to do business and sell food. So there's several different scenarios for restaurants. I'll use Berry Tavern as the first example. They have an outdoor patio kind of veranda where they can have already set up tables. It's part of their establishment. And so they really didn't need much in terms of permission. I think maybe other than perhaps to serve alcohol outside. I'm not sure if they had that. But
I think they did.
so that was that allowed them to get set up and implement that right away. Now there's other businesses, sort of like Brothers or Sawsdy, that don't really have a patio, but they have a large, the width of the sidewalks in front of their businesses is such that they could set up tables outside without interfering too much with pedestrian traffic. And then the third scenario would be for on the south side of Maple Street. So for Rocco, Supremes, Hong Kong, Kathmandu, 9 Elm Street, their sidewalks are relatively narrow. So part of this regulation is to kind of repurpose the parking spaces in front of the businesses and use those as an extension of the sidewalk. And the existing sidewalk would be cordoned off with, with and allow tables to be set up with umbrellas and still have that distancing that's required. I think they may need to have some type of plexiglass barriers between the tables. I'm not sure all the details, but
Matthew, if they insist on people wearing masks, that's a duplicate system of social distancing, basically. And the thing is that these restaurants, there are a few restaurants in town that are really struggling. I mean, there's many people that are unemployed today. So now we're opening it up, but we're not opening it up to the extent that they could open up. What about the inside spaces? I mean, these restaurants have tables on the inside. And the thing is, who gives the town manager or the governor the authority to limit the number of people inside their restaurant? They have a permit already in place for every single one of those seats. The thing is, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the State Department of Public Health has issued regulations prohibiting indoor dining for the moment. But also, I don't think customers may not be comfortable inside in a crowded, even with some distancing, the tables are spread apart. People may not be comfortable. I think being outside, they're more apt to patronize the business. And when they're at the tables, the customers aren't required to wear the masks. They would need to make a reservation beforehand. You just can't walk up and sit down. The employees would be required to wear masks and make sure that there was a certain level of cleanliness after each party had completed their meal. But I think this is at least a start, and hopefully that these businesses have already come up with some type of description or kind of a plan, so to speak, about how they want to roll this out. It's not going to be a cheap solution because they have to purchase tables, stanchions, ropes to cordon off the areas. So, but it does sound like the town has dedicated a team to help these businesses get up and running. Kind of a learning curve for everyone, but hopefully, maybe this could even become a regular thing, even after all the pandemic has passed. Maybe we can find a way to kind of promote this type of dining outside.
Put in a pedestrian way in downtown Danvers. We have talked in the past in regard to possibly closing off Maple Street from the old fire station to the square. Let the businesses that are operating on Maple Street put their tent or whatever they need in the street. We need to help our residents and our businesses in our community to get going. Right now, 43 million Americans are still out of a job. Countless businesses are still on the verge of closing for good. I don't know how many of our businesses will close for good. We need to assist them. And the thing is that this temporary outdoor seating and use regulations for local businesses impacted by COVID-19, it's another regulation that they're imposing on our businesses. So we need to consider the facts that we are being impacted. And I'm talking about business people. And primarily in our town is restaurants. Isn't that true?
Yeah. So I think we're beginning that kind of loosening up of the restrictions that we've had over the past few months. But again, I think this is being done in a smart and kind of well-planned way. If we look at some of the other states that just arbitrarily allow mass gatherings now, we're seeing an uptick in the number of cases of COVID-19 cases. So I think this is something we have to be careful with. We just can't say, we're tired of staying home, let's just resume business as usual. It's not a smart way to go about it, I believe.
Well, I just want to read one paragraph here that may help clarify the situation. While our elected officials have been busy grappling with the coronavirus, all other issues have been put on hold, whether it's the fight to rein in the deep state's illegal spy schemes or continue President Trump's conservative justice reform. It's all taken a back seat. Now, the focus has changed, as we've seen in the last 2 weeks. Basically, it's changed from COVID-19 to the demonstrations that have happened in our cities and towns. Our cities and towns are being really hurt. And what happens is that we're driving business further and further away. So this is a good step forward for Danvers, but Massachusetts needs to straighten up. I understand that the restaurants in New Hampshire have been opened up for inside and outside dining, whatever they want. So the thing is that we are restricting our business community and our citizens to the point where they're afraid of each other. So,
and rightly so.
It's what?
I think that rightly so, because New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut into Massachusetts, that was a real hot spot for the outbreaks. So, Maine, New Hampshire, they may be opening up, but they weren't impacted like we were. So, you have to take it town by town, state by state. You just can't arbitrarily say we're going to have these huge rallies with tens of thousands of people. All you're doing then is to create another hot spot and then allowing people to disperse back into in the various communities. So I think for me personally, I would rather just play it safe. Better to overreact and be overly cautious. That's my own personal perspective.
So my personal perspective is, yes, we're all employed, whether we're working from home or in, remote locations. However, there are over 43 million people that are unemployed in this country, and they are unemployed because of our government imposing these restrictions. And these restrictions have not proven to be accurate or maybe in some cases too restricted. But now what we're hearing and what we're seeing out on our cities and some of the towns, for more than a week, the Massachusetts National Guard has patrolled the streets of Boston in camouflage fatigues, carrying rifles and wearing black vests that read "Military Police" in white letters. The troops were called into Boston by Governor Charlie Baker on the night of May 31st after confrontations broke out between police and protesters, and some people smashed windows and stole goods in downtown Crossing. The chaos followed a series of large peaceful gatherings throughout the city, protesting the killing of Black people by police, which is understandable. But some activists now and some elected officials and scholars say the continued military presence in Boston may have a chilling effect on free speech and assembly. They also say it is the wrong response to a movement fundamentally concerned with law enforcement excessive use of force. This is called martial law, basically, and that's why the military was called in. And the thing is, we only have to think about ourselves letting this happen, because the demonstrations are totally great. They should be held, because there were some restrictions and damage and basically murder in Minneapolis. But the thing is that we have experienced the same kinds of demonstrations here in Danvers, which were peaceful, well attended by young individuals. This is the generation that's going to take over when we leave, and they're going to run this country. So that was my addition to that particular item.
Yes, I just throw in it. I just wanted to mention, I think I read today that the Massachusetts National Guard is being withdrawn today from Boston. So they were there not to enforce martial law, but rather just to protect the communities. You know, whenever we have peaceful demonstrations, there's always a small group that wants to use that for their own personal motive. So, you know, all it takes is a couple of, a small group. So who knows what their background is, but I think that was the primary reason the governor brought the guard in. But they're no longer needed, so they're going to go back home. They actually are people that live among us, by the way. They're not professional soldiers per se.
They are called for Afghanistan and Iraq. So those are the same individuals that go out on one-year missions in those countries when the war was going on. Now, I personally remember back in the 60s when military was called out and we had issues such as Kent State and the demonstrations in many, many cities that were for the same purpose, basically. And the thing is, nothing has changed since then. So maybe this time this will take place and makes a change in our culture, but at what cost? That's the problem. So we have we're doing pretty good on time. But what I wanted to do is have you any closing comments on the business and the restaurant openings?
Oh no, nothing other than I hope that that people, the residents go and patronize these businesses. It doesn't make a lot of sense they go through this effort of setting up the outdoor dining, and if no one shows up, I did see the Berry Tavern busy a couple nights ago, so I think that people are, it's kind of you build it and they will come. I hopefully that's what will happen. And with this nice weather, is probably the best time of the year to have this occur. June, July.
Well, now that we've reached our time limit on that story and we're agreed that we're going to proceed further, is the next item, I think, on our agenda here is the town meeting is scheduled for June 22nd. May have to rely on 1/12, the spending plan proposed at the selectmen's meeting, and they approved it. So I don't know why we're even holding the town meeting. They already spent the money for July 1 through July 31st. There is a need for a quorum of 75 town meeting members to be able to conduct business. Town manager's budget and the warrant articles are really unrealistic because he doesn't know what the impact is actually going to be, except for the fact that the state and the tax receipts that we get from meals and excise and all that have been drastically reduced. I don't think we've taken that under consideration totally. And these budgets that have been presented are unaffordable after the costs of the town are realized and analyzed for their, this is for the next fiscal year. Selectmen did a lot of pounding of their chest during the 2021 budget review. Not one selectman asked for a reduction to the tax burden on the 25,000 residents in our town. Budget review was conducted. The meeting was attended by all who had interest in benefiting from the town treasury. No residents, taxpayers were even allowed to input. I know maybe you have had some luck with getting through to the selectmen's meeting or the FinCom, but I send in and, questions, they totally ignored it. So I don't know, maybe it's me, but you had some luck, didn't you, Matt?
Yeah, they read my question, but then they said that it had already been answered and they moved on. So I think they were just placating me.
No, they blew you off too.
No, they read the question, so at least I get credit for that. But yeah, it's not like it would typically where you would have this opportunity to have a back and forth banter with whatever department was asking for, money or submitting their budget requests for the year. So
that's right, and this quorum issue is a serious issue because why are we restricted from leaving our house, our own homes, and not being able to travel anywhere we want to because of these dictatorial directives? And that's my own terminology. It's my own opinion. I don't care. You're not going to change my opinion. But the dictatorial edicts that are coming out of the governor's office, and then the town manager, in his wisdom, has issued an emergency order similar to what the governor did. He has no authority to do that. The town's board of selectmen do, but they were buried in their bunkers, and they haven't said a peep about what's going on with the restrictions that are happening to us. We have spoken about it many times. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the selectmen just kind of pawned it off to the town manager to let him figure it out. But, I think they had to do a 1/12 budget for next month just to keep the business, keep the government open, kind of like one of those, Capitol Hill, 2 a.m. kind of things where you just, to keep the government open, you just pass a temporary spending bill. That's kind of really what it is. But town meeting, not enough town meeting members show up on the 22nd and don't have quorum. That means we may have to do this 1/12 thing for several more times until we have another town meeting later in the summer or in the fall.
That's right.
So,
And the one issue that I gathered from the selectmen's meeting on, was it Tuesday, I believe?
Yep.
Is that, yes, they are asking for a total of fiscal year 2021 budget of $118 million. 1/12 of that $118 million is basically just under $10 million. However, in their calculations and their estimation for the month of July, they're going to spend $20 million. Now that is unreliable, unrealistic. Why are we grabbing all of these funds? Because most of the budget comes from the real estate tax receipts. And they have money left over from this year that is going to be used for next year as well as the normal free cash account. But the one thing that grabbed me right away was July spending plan amount that they asked for is $20.439 million, where it should have been 1/12, $10.6 million. So, but the one thing that was really omitted, and maybe this was a mistake or an overreaction, is there's a newspaper article that I was reading. In a note to selectmen, Danvers Town Manager Steve Bartha signaled more severe cuts may be needed once the town gets a clearer picture of the impact the coronavirus crisis will have on local and state funding. This was quoted by Dave Copeland. The cuts are already coming. The residents must also adjust their budgets. The inflated 1/12 proposed budget has already come and it is way inflated. Basically, what the selectmen did during their meeting is they approved that this is what should be spent without town meeting involvement because they can. Now, when the town meeting convenes and it doesn't have the quorum, then it'll go into effect, I hope. But right now, what I see is that they've already given permission for the town manager to spend that money.
yeah, but that's just tentative, right? So if town meeting, if they do get the quorum, they can override that, and then they just approve the entire budget for the next fiscal year.
But the town manager's budget is bogus in a way, because it hasn't considered all the effects that have to be considered as a result of all these restrictions and imposing the home, home confinement, and then the businesses are out of business. Where are the business people crying out loud here? They're not. So I don't know what's going on, but the one
people
thing
just are overly optimistic about. They're afraid to look at the doomsday scenario where, revenue is across the board is down 10%, which, that would be millions of dollars for us, not just for the town government, but also for our schools.
Well,
so it would be a
especially
dramatic decrease, and you're talking, you're talking layoffs. You're talking painful cuts that the town meeting will have to make.
Matthew, the town of Brookline, Mansfield, Randolph, city of Weymouth, and many other ones that have already reduced the school staff. They laid the teachers off, basically. But in our case, we're still at $46 million. and there is no anticipated reduction except for this note that was given to Mr. Copeland. And the thing is that we have not considered all the effects yet. So why should the town meeting be voting on a budget that's bogus?
I think it's just going to be a temporary until reality sets in. We'll have to have another special town meeting later in the summer or in the fall. You know, just recently, I think it was the school department decided not to pay the part-time coaches. I think they received some type of stipend for maybe several $1,000s.
Right.
And not that they don't deserve it, but just I'm using this as an example. When they decided not to pay that stipend, people went ballistic that they deserved the money. And I don't doubt that, but you can imagine how people are going to react when they see actual school teachers or police officers or firemen were forced to lay them off. I mean, that is kind of the doomsday scenario that we're ignoring. We're just thinking that it's just kind of, just like last year and the year before in terms of spending.
That's exactly what's happening. And the problem is that they don't have the courage to face the reality. And we need to face reality. And maybe, I don't know if I'm going to go to town meeting, but I think they would miss me if I don't go. But I will try. But, I feel uncomfortable going to a town meeting that has been basically set up with the 6-foot distancing, and it's all copacetic now. You can go with a large group greater than 10 people. But the thing is that the local meetings, the planning board meeting, the zoning meeting, the selectmen's meeting, you can't attend those. You have to do them like we're doing this show. The problem is that this is being done for the convenience of authorizing spending of our tax money without any real numbers at the end. So the problem is that no reduction is made in anything that may have reduced the tax burden on our seniors and young families who may have to leave this wonderful town. And I've read this before, but this is a message that I think we need to get across.
Yeah, well, the school board, they sliced $400,000 from their $43 million budget, and they were proud of themselves. But that's only a start. $400,000 doesn't go very far.
They were shamed into it because what they were complaining about is that Essex Tech is charging so much more this year. The problem is that more students wanted to go to Essex Tech, and our tuitions are going to the Essex Tech. Now, when are we going to get cuts in our Danvers High School system where we have less students? I mean, a few months ago or a year ago, we were complaining that we had too many students. The problem is that it's all about money at the end. So we need to go back to basics, and we need to start looking at how we're going to operate in the future, because right now it's disorganized and unrealistic. And the Board of Selectmen is sitting there in their bunkers, and they're not saying a damn thing because they're afraid of offending someone. It's about time they stood up and be counted.
Somebody's got to speak the truth. It's just ignoring the problem is just, we all know that's not going to work out in the end for us. So we can make the choices ourselves, or we can have them forced upon us.
And we're going to have them forced upon us because the selectmen have basically delegated all their authority to the town manager, and he's doing what he needs to do for himself, not for the residents.
Well, somebody's got it. Nature abhors a vacuum. So if there's a leadership vacuum, then someone or some group is going to step in and take charge, and otherwise we just have turmoil.
Well,
So I don't know how it's going to play out. To go to town meeting and suggest to cut any area of the budget, you'll be ridiculed as being someone that's not a team player or whatever. So I don't know who has the pants to stand up and tell the group what they should be hearing.
Well, see, that town meeting is what, 2 weeks away? Yeah, 2 weeks away.
Yep.
And what we need to do is we need to get some courage on speaking to the town meeting, because right now, you are absolutely right. There is a vacuum and nobody wants to stick their neck out because reality is facing us and we don't even know it. So we have come full circle to our 4 items. And I have other items in here, but that's my own mission that I've been preaching right along about the civil rights and our own freedoms that are being taken away by our own government that we elected. So we need to regroup and re-establish our authority as residents over the town meeting and the Board of Selectmen in this town. And that's what we're concentrating on. So I would like to just close this thing for a minute. I have great experience and respect for the police that have come out and discussed some of the issues that we have been encountering in our town. You can talk to any one of the officers. They are very receptive to hearing what you are thinking, and they are on the job. The issue is that our town has become a sleepy town, and because we're all locked up in our martial law residences. So what I want to do is closing comments. Matthew, do you have any closing comments right now?
Yeah, just when you talked about opening up with the town meeting in the field house. So we have the ZBA has public hearings that are in postponement at the time, and they've agreed to allow those postponements to continue without having the public attend in person. The planning board has ignored that and are proceeding. They have a meeting scheduled for the 23rd to talk about 3 contentious applications, 5 Cherry, 13 Essex Street, and then a big one over on Harbor Street by the boat ramp. So mentioned that at the selectmen's meeting that these public hearings, if they're not in person, and they certainly have the ability to do so in a large, venue like the multi-purpose room at the middle school or the high school auditorium. But they've decided they're just going to go forward. The applicant has an upper hand in discussing in real time with the board, and the public just views it in a passive kind of way. So I just mentioned that. It's very troubling for quite a few people.
Thank you, Matthew. And David, if you can show the last picture that I have selected, is just as a comment, the town hall shuttered with no activity. Where are the employees? Who is in charge of the town? Where are the selectmen and the select woman? They are settled comfortably in their bunkers, protected from the governor's actions. When will the dictatorship stop? We need to open up this government, the businesses, and our lives. And this has to stop with the town hall being closed to public access. This is our town hall. This is not the town manager's or the selectman's town hall. We need to have it reopened, and we need to have it reopened now.